And then on to Roger Brown, CFO at Seplat, formerly MD for Oil and Gas EMEA at Standard Bank, where he advised on some of the biggest deals in the Nigerian market. So we've heard from the newer entrants, the likes of Chariot and First E&P, that they're having to become increasingly creative and also resilient when looking to tap the markets for capital. Seplat, however, is a seasoned player and has raised significant funds in the more conventional markets, from equity raising to debt, the capital markets, traditional syndicated bank loans as well. Now, having said that, you're an established player with a strong track record. Are you still seeing, are you still able to get pretty ready access to these conventional markets? And also, are you looking at alternatives yourselves, alternative ways of funding your ventures?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jason. I think I've got my founders in the room here, and I think they'll smile in their face that we're described as a seasonal performer, right? We've been around for sort of 10 years as a company, and we've been in the capital markets for a decade almost as a business. What we did, and a little bit of background by us, I mean, we are production, so we're P, not E, in the spectrum, and eventually we will move into A&D, appraisal development, production. But our business model is a very simple and understandable business model. It's get production in Nigeria and then eventually beyond Nigeria and grow that production, right? And doing that, you need access to capital to be able to do that. So that's why we started off, we went the route of setting up a partnership. So rather than trying to find a bunch of equity, we got one partner, Mullen Prom, who came in and gave us a shareholder loan back in 2010 to buy the assets. But what surprised them at the time, I think, was how quickly that capital was paid back. So that shareholder loan was paid back within the first year when we went into the debt markets and raised money through African capital banks predominantly and some sort of development type funds. And that started us off in capital. And what we looked at is, the key thing about capital is understanding all types of capital there is, and there's a huge spectrum. And then understanding your model and your business model and where do you sit within that spectrum of capital. And then the key thing here is to be open-minded. So we listen a lot as a business, even though we've been 10 years on and we're called seasonal, and we've raised over $2.5 billion of capital, about $2 billion in the debt markets and $500 million when we did our IPO in 2014, and we were the first. Now, and I still can't believe this, that we're the first Nigerian company ever to list on the main board of the London Stock Exchange, which is unbelievable, and it will change over time. But we accessed $500 million of equity capital. So we, from day one, wanted to understand our business and how it fitted into the spectrum and be open-minded in how we access it. And what we did is we started off with debt capital, predominantly from the African banks because they understand it. And what we then did is we refinanced that in 2015, and we put in, at that point, a range of international debt banks as well as local banks. And that was $1 billion financing we put in place in 2015. And then in 2018, we took all that $1 billion out. We paid a lot of it off. And today, we now sit with purely international lenders, and we put in place a Eurobond. So what we wanted to do was have the range, the spectrum of financing. Now that's more traditional. But it's critical that you're able to pick up all different types of financing, from equity to bonds to bank debt. When we look at now, what we say, we're about to do another project. We've taken FID on our Ano gas project, and we're about to go out and raise a bunch of funds. And in doing that, we haven't gone as a company, well, we're comfortable in bank debt and bonds. What we've now done is said, let's sit back and let's look at what spectrum of capital is out there, and let's look at what capital is the best for that specific project. So this project, we are doing a 50-50 joint venture with the government under the incorporated joint venture structure, which is what the Nigerian government is really now pushing. So we wanted to make sure that we looked at the right sort of capital around that. That is looking at vendor financing. Not so much from Demola, you've got yours in operations. Ours is much more in equipment supply. But that's a really good source of capital around there. We're looking at bank debt. We have looked at capital markets. It's probably not going to be relevant for that. But the point I'm trying to make is don't be fixated in any specific type of structure. Be open-minded. Also, be practical, right? So you need to understand internally. We have always hired in people who understand the capital markets. And I think any advice that's any junior is make sure there's people inside your organization to understand what capital providers want. Banks never give you an umbrella on a rainy day, do they? They always give you one on a dry day. So be prepared. Be prepared for banks to offer you money when you don't need it, and just figure out, have a plan around you do it. So that's where we are specifically in our evolution. I know we're running out of time here.
Yes, that was
down
great.
the last sort of minutes,
I could listen to you all for.
I could probably pause there. I could
couple
talk
of
all
hours,
day, but I'll pause there.
I'm conscious that we're getting close to our deadline.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Shall we try one more question? The second most popular. We rarely see Asian capital, be it equity or debt, deployed in the African oil and gas space. Why is that? How can we change that given availability of capital?
I think the issue is it's tied. I very rarely see it commoditized as not tied to a Chinese company coming in to build the pipeline or a Middle East company. So it's tied capital, and there is tons going into Africa, but untied, like commoditized, just going in to lend a project, very few. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon because of the requirements of the home countries for that.
Okay, thank you for that. So the time is up. Shall we have can we have a sentence from each of you just to wrap up following these discussions?
For me, the last bit is really it's horses for courses, right? So understand there's money across the spectrum. There's a risk-reward swingometer, okay? Don't try and push water uphill. Go to the providers of capital for your specific risk you've got, okay? And understand what they want. The yield will be the factor probably you'll get them over the line. But don't lose heart. There's absolutely money there. And in my time, I've seen some incredible, innovative funding done in Nigeria, specifically, and across all of Africa. So the money's there and it's available.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'm sure you'll all agree that was a serious, practical insight there from the real deal here up on the stage. And so all that's left for me to do is to thank each and every one of you for coming and sharing your experiences with us today. So thank you all.